And now it's my pleasure, privilege, and honor to introduce Sister Joyce Meyer. Sister is a presentation sister from Aberdeen, South Dakota. Sister has a long and vast curriculum. She has served as an executive director of the Conrad Hilton Fund, a grant-making organization supporting the work of Catholic sisters globally, and she had served in that position from 1999 through October 2011. I met Sister for the first time in Bolivia when she came to talk to us and teach us how to write grants. And it was a really enjoyable experience because it was the first time that I had met a presentation sister with such depth of experience and knowledge and such care for the people. Sister was so involved with the cultures of the people and learning from the sisters. And it was just a beautiful sharing and learning. And she helped us a lot throughout the country of Bolivia. And Sister also worked throughout many other countries, Asia, Africa, Latin America, Eastern Europe. Sister even someplace I was reading, they said that she has visited more than 57 countries, empowering communities of women religious to educate their sisters and to function autonomously in advancing their ministries. So Sister has really endorsed what it means to be a woman religious in today's world. And she was honored by the Leadership Conference of Women Religious in 2021, the Lifetime Achievement Award. And this award is presented to women religious who have extraordinary impact on religious life. Sister is recognized throughout the world for her generous service, and she has worked with thousands of congregations and women. Sister also worked in Zambia, first-hand experience working in a third world country, and she was also executive director for the Zambia Association of Sisterhoods, the National Conference of Women Religious. Sister at home was also in leadership in her congregation for 12 years, 8 of which she served as president. Sister was also one of the ones who started and had the idea with others to really establish the IPA, the International Presentation Association, as a non-governmental organization with special consultative status with the UN. So Sister has a very vast experience. She currently works as a consultant to organizations who work with sisters, particularly in Africa and Asia. She is on various boards, the Conrad Hilton Foundation, Medicines for Humanity, the International Foundation of the Good Shepherd Sisters, and has served since 2014 as international liaison to women religious for the Global Sisters Report. Sister is also a retreat director and a meeting facilitator. And so without further ado, I present Sister Joyce Meyer.
Thank you very much, Laura. When you're my age, you can all have a long list of things that you've accomplished, but I appreciate your acclamation, I guess. Anyway, greetings, everybody. I'm very happy to be with you this evening and to reflect on this very important theme of hope. I often wonder why I agree to giving these talks, but every time I do, I'm really enriched myself in doing the reflection and study, actually, that can only bring hope. That sometimes, and I can only bring hope that I can only hope that it resonates with somebody that's listening to them, because it has enriched me myself. The word cultivating in the theme for tonight is such a rich word for me. I really do believe that hope is a gift and a grace that we need to pray for. But for me, it also has to be cultivated, or it can weaken and even dissipate. We also need hope in order to be resilient, and that's the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from difficult situations. I experienced this dramatically this past December when I visited sisters living in a remote region of Tanzania. The sisters had neither electricity nor access to clean water until the mid-2000s. To me, it's deplorable that this is a reality of our world, but it's certainly not uncommon. There are still millions of people in our world without water and electricity. When the sisters approached the government in Tanzania for access to electricity, the government required that the sisters, if they wanted it, they had to finance the building of the system in their region. Can you imagine? It was impossible for the sisters to do that. And over the years, their ministries from the 1940s, when they were founded, grew into a hospital, clinic, schools, conference center, mother house, retirement center, and 4 farms. So you can imagine the number of people being served was tremendous. Finally, in 2013, they were able to obtain a grant to build their own electricity plant using waterfalls from the mountains about a mile away from their mother house. The sisters were even trained as engineers to manage this hydroelectric system, which made sure that their facilities always had electricity, even when the others who were relying on the government systems did not. For me, that was amazing. Woman power was there again. However, they still were without clean water. But way back in 2010, when I was with the Hilton Fund for Sisters, the superior asked if I could help them get some water. Our grants at that time were only about $15,000. And so I asked her to give me a proposal for the cost. When she sent it, I was in shock. The cost to build a gravity water project cost about $1 million. I said, you need to get another opinion from a water engineer that I knew in Tanzania. He got it down to about 800,000, which was still astronomical. They begged me to help them find money. So I did agree to help them find donors, but wondered how long it would take. But over the next 9 years, we did fundraising, and with each bit of money that came in, the project progressed very slowly. They were constantly asking me to come and visit the situation for myself, but I promised to come when it was finished. So finally, in 2021, it was finished, but COVID and my schedule prevented me from going to visit them until this past December. It was only being there that I really realized the immensity of this project that they had undertaken. The huge need for water, for one thing, when I visited one after the other of these facilities, and not being very scientific, just witnessing the miracle of gravity was amazing to me. Their mother house, the conference center, all their ministries in that region where they were living were now provided with water that was pushed down from the mountaintop to the mother house tank, which was huge, pushed up into this big tank, and then dispersed out into the 12 different institutions and a public access water point. Building the distribution center itself, just the dispersal of water, took an entire year. So you can imagine the immensity that these women took on. It just blew my mind. Until that time, of course, people were walking to the local river, which I visited, to collect dirty water, which they then had to filter and boil for all the people they were serving. I kept wondering, how in God's name did they endure this for so many years? But as we learned, it was hope. It was hope that sustained them. Relentless, patient hope over those 9 years of waiting, and willing to work slowly at this project. I shared a little in their struggles to keep up hope, because fundraising can be grueling for those of you who have done it. When donors can't really imagine the need, because I couldn't imagine it until I saw it. So often I wanted to quit myself, and then a small donation would come in, and that's what kept me going. So I was so excited finally in December to visit the sisters after a 12-hour journey from the airport in Dar es Salaam. And I will never forget the welcome I received as we drove into the compound. The joy was electric, singing, dancing, shouting gratitude when I arrived. Yes, it was gratitude for the water, the money. But I came to realize from them that it was even more than that. It was the companionship they felt from me all those years that they were also celebrating. Friendship and caring nurture resiliency and hope. And we will see this too in Nano's life. And I'm sure all of you have experienced that same thing. Without friendship and caring from other people, our hope and resiliency cannot be managed, cannot be nurtured. So resiliency, as I said earlier, is the capacity to withstand suffering and then to recover quickly in order to keep moving ahead. And it requires a kind of elasticity of spirit, a suppleness to spring back after being knocked down or crushed, really. So resiliency is the capacity to not allow pain or suffering to endure and overshadow hope and belief in a future. When we look at Nano, we see a similar resiliency born of hope. From the time of her acceptance of the call while in France until the day she died, Nano endured constant threat and obstacles, family issues, lack of money, lack of interest, lack of candidates for the Ursuline community she had hoped to take over her mission. And it went on, as we've just learned in these reflection pieces. How did she do it? From her letters, we hear that the odds she felt seemed insurmountable at times, but she was convinced that of her mission to provide education for those Irish children. She kept focused on mission. So I went back to those letters and letter fragments to try to uncover the roots of her resiliency and hope that she expressed in her own words. There were many letters saved from her to Miss Fitzsimmons from 1769 to 1770. Miss Fitzsimmons was the first woman Nano sent to France to become an Ursuline novice, who would then come back and establish the Ursuline convent in Ireland. The other set of letters was from 1776 to 1783, and those were to Teresa Mullally. This woman helped Nano establish her new community in Dublin. Nano often hoped that Teresa would join the community, but although she supported the mission and the new sisterhood, Teresa did not feel that same call. What struck me the most as I read the letters was Nano's hope and resiliency. In Nano's hope and resiliency was her deep sense of faith in her call to that mission. She shares that with Miss Fitzsimmons, this moment of call, when she says, quote, "Nothing would have made me come home but the decision of the clergyman that I should run a great risk of salvation if I did not follow this inspiration." In other words, she would not become her true self, would not fulfill the destiny God had for her if she did not follow the inspiration that was relentless within her. I would guess that all of us have memories of such moments of call that moved us towards a destiny that makes us who we are today, that gives us a sense of our mission and meaning in life. The more I reflected on this, I realized the importance of remembering such moments of insight or experience, that cultivate enduring hope in us. Looking back and recounting those deep moments of knowing, that kind of inner sense of knowing something that led us onward in our lives. Not just the positive moments, but even those we experienced as negative, because every moment has its place in cultivating hope if we can recognize them as such and then integrate them into our system of hope, sense of hope. The first letter of Peter, St. Peter, chapter or verse 3-5, reminds us of this need for cultivation. This was interesting, I found this. He says, always be prepared to give an account of the hope that is in you. Sharing hope with others supports others. Hope gives zest to life, resiliency, and joy. Pope Benedict, in his encyclical Spe Salvi, says that the quote, the one who hopes lives differently, has been given new life. And I would add that new life comes over and over. It isn't just a one-time thing. That is what resilience is about. He goes on, he says, hope requires a change of life. And hope itself can help us to change how we see things, the things that we have experienced. Again, looking at Nano, her dream that the Ursulines would take up her particular style of education was thwarted. But in the end, she realized that it was she who needed change, not the Ursulines. The Ursulines were following their path. It was Nano who had to change her mind. She evidently kept searching for someone else to take on her work because she says to Teresa Mullally, and I quote from her letter, not finding any person here inclined to undertake such an affair, in other words, her kind of education, made me at last consent to the bishop's request to start my own group. What made me defer all this time was finding myself so improper a person to undertake it. It was Nano's way of seeing herself in the situation that had to change. And once accepting her own need for conversion, she says, quote, the Almighty makes use of the weakest means to bring about his works. Hope can require us to change our minds, our views of ourselves, our views of situations. Hope helps us transcend the way we think about something, opens us up to wider horizons, gives us new energy, ultimately brings us joy. Today's cosmic spirituality, I think, is calling us to this kind of change, a new vision of God, a different way of viewing God's nature, a different way of how all things and beings are connected and evolving, moving us to see the universe and our place in it differently. Perhaps to see ourselves, our particular call, as only one important piece of evolution, not its end. Are we open to such transformation of consciousness? I ask myself this, am I really open to that kind of transformation of consciousness? And this includes not only us individually, personally, but even we as congregations. Many of our presentation groups are now talking about coming to conclusion. But we are not really ending. We are, in fact, part of, or one more step in the new presentation body that is evolving and emerging, continuing Nano's dream. Do we see this? I think that's an important thing for us. Are we really coming to conclusion, or are we really just a step, adding one more step to the evolution of presentation, congregation, or movement, or whatever we want to call it around the world. Nano's dream. Change can also be the fruit of disappointment. Miss Fitzsimmons had helped Nano by forming young women who Nano hoped would return to Ireland and carry on her schools. This was a very disappointing process. Women would go to France. Some would eventually come back to Ireland. Some left. Others stayed with Ursulines. But what struck me as I was thinking about this is that Nano, in fact, was an instrument in a new flourishing of religious life in Ireland, for one thing, and in France. It wasn't her own, but it was a flourishing of religious life. Her efforts in this work was the fruit of her own personal disappointment. It's an interesting thing to think about how disappointments can be change can come out of as a fruit out of that disappointment. At this time, Nano didn't grasp this, that what she was really doing, that she was used as an instrument of God to the flourishing of religious life in Ireland. And we hear the anguish and the hurt, in fact, that she felt in her letters. And even when she was founding us, there were only 3 that joined her that Christmas Eve. So it must have been painful for her. But transformation of consciousness takes time because everybody resists, just like Nano did. It's a part of being human. Nano's transparent sharing of her pain with Miss Fitzsimmons and Teresa revealed to me another important element of cultivating hope and transformation of consciousness, and that is friendship. Nano depended on these 2 women, her family, and others for support and caring. Friendship provides the love and care and the kind of standing with that all of us need to sustain our resilience and hope, to not give up, to believe in our own call, to trust in our efforts that they will bear fruit. Nano clearly found consolation and joy in the letters she received from Teresa, and often speaks of the disappointment when there are long silences. Her friendship with Teresa was precious and poignant, particularly after she founded the Sisters in Cork and then in Dublin, while she was searching for a rule that would best fit her mission. There are several excerpts in the letters that speak about the kind of rule she was searching for and worried about. Because the religious life she envisioned was so different from what was known at the time. She was an unknowing pioneer, and it was painful, but that's the lot of pioneers. Any of you who have done something that people thought was crazy know how painful that can be. So she needed others to believe in her quest. We know prayer sustained Nano. We learned that from what other people told about her. And no doubt it was in prayer that, as St. Peter commends, she reflected on the friendships that sustained her. We can follow that example. Sometimes taking time to recognize the friends we rely on, those we can share light with, but also the darkness. They receive our pain without judgment or rejection. True friendship helps us to allow darkness a place in our lives. We often hear people trying to encourage others with piety. That's intended to help, but instead only adds to the darkness. Listening, receiving is what is important, without trying to make things okay. Listening is an essential element of friendship that cultivates hope. As Nano went along in her life, facing the many ups and downs, she came to see how God does use inevitable setbacks to open other doors. But such awareness takes time. You just don't have it at the moment. in the moment. We need to allow ourselves the time necessary to be given that light. That willingness to live in darkness, even welcoming it, can be a pathway to hope. Some of you may know Dan Schuette's song, Holy Darkness, Blessed Night. It's a song that speaks of the need to recognize that much of life in general is a walk in darkness. The scriptures tell us that it's a walk in faith, so it's darkness. And it takes compassion towards ourselves and towards situations to hear the answers that seem hidden. Hope requires a waiting on God, a God of silence that will eventually show us the path, as we heard today in the prayer from Zechariah. As the song says, cultivating hope requires that we embrace God's holy night of the darkness of our present world. Why would we embrace the darkness? Because in the darkness, we can learn to embrace our own humanity and the humanity of others as well. The loneliness, the grief, the shame, the death. Nano clearly grew in awareness of this as she speaks of her financial poverty, the anxiety of having poor teachers that she had to send away. Remember hearing that? The struggles with building her own convent because she had used most of her money for the building of the Ursuline convent. Her own health, although we know that she tried to ignore that. She kept repeating often that what she was attempting was God's work, so it would come to pass. She writes to Teresa, quote, "Though neither you nor I should live to see it prosper in our time, yet I hope it may prosper hereafter and be of universal service to the kingdom of God." I comfort myself with this thought. Listen, I comfort myself with this thought when I am most dejected at the many disappointments I have met with. So the comfort was having Teresa with whom to share that darkness of internal struggle, grief, disappointment, but also there were moments of joy that she celebrated. It was really encouraging for me just to read about those dark moments that she experienced within her family, those she hired that didn't work out, the people who ridiculed her and made fun of her. Nano is far from being a plaster figure to be admired and lauded. She was a fully human woman who went through all the dark times that each of us endures at one time or another in our lives. As she embraced all these human moments, she herself became more human. She emptied herself to take on the sufferings of others. And in doing that, she became not just a woman of hope, but hope itself. This is what she saw in Jesus and learned from him as a Sacred Heart, who emptied himself to take into his heart all the darkness of his world. And of course, the joys. It is the same for us. We are to be hope as our hearts grow in the likeness of Jesus' fully human heart. Our call to cultivate hope is to become hope, and it requires us to be totally open to the darkness of our time, even though it's painful. To welcome it, embrace it, be emptied in order to take it all in, and let it transform our hearts into that full humanness of Jesus. Jesus worked hard to bring light and love to his world, just as we do. But mostly, it was his trust and hope that sustained his belief that it was God's place to do the work of transformation. he found joy in this belief. Jesus only had 3 years to live out his mission. We've had many. Most of us sitting here have had many. So we too need to remember that we are only one part of the evolution of the universe, into one of love. So in ending, I want to read a letter of Nano that she wrote to all of us, presentation people. I honestly do not know exactly where this comes from, but it captures Nano's hope, and I hope it cultivates your hope as well. I'm going to hold it up. You can see it's a book of Nano's letters, and it's beautifully done with all this outline of pictures and so on, illustrations. The borders were done by a sister, Mary Stanislaus Mulcahy, who was from Clondalk Presentation Convent in Dublin in 1857. So evidently, these letters are still in that convent in Dublin. I don't know how this came to me. For the life of me, I can't remember. But it says it came from the Presentation Convent in Monasterevin. So somebody must have sent me it as a gift. But anyway, I want to read you this letter because it is so beautifully done and very inspiring. My dear sisters and presentation people, greetings and love to each of you. I take such delight in knowing how my little dream has evolved right across the globe, and you are a wonderful expression of that dream. And I remember the beginnings, the journey, the fidelity of our God. You see, it has pleased the Almighty to make me succeed when I had everything, as I may say, to fight against. I began in a poor, humble manner, and though it pleased the divine will to give me severe trials in this foundation, yet it is to show that it is his work and has not been effected by any human means. I can't too much admire your zeal and great trust in the divine providence, which I have always looked on as the most settled beginning any foundation of this kind could have. Providence has ordered everything for the best in her regard to keep her for this place. We must think the Almighty permits everything for the best. You'll see, with his assistance, everything promises well. I must say, every disappointment we have had, the Almighty has been pleased to make it turn out to our advantage, though my impatience very often made me not submit to his divine will as I ought. But the Almighty is sufficient and will soon make up this loss to us. By degrees, with the assistance of God, we may do a great deal. It's all in the power of the Almighty. We don't know what is best for us, and so ought to be resigned to the divine will. The Almighty makes use of the weakest means to bring about his works. We must leave it to the Almighty. He will do everything for the best of it, I hope. I don't approve of your desponding so much as I perceived in your last letter, though neither you nor I should live to see it, nor I should live to see it prosper in our time. Yet I hope it may prosper hereafter and be of universal service to the kingdom. I comfort myself with this thought when I am most dejected at the many disappointments I have met with. With God's assistance, everything promises well. I am so proud of you. With my love and blessing, Nano Nagel. So with this, I want to just thank you and just say again how happy I am to be with you and having this opportunity.